The hotel manager looked at the purple heart on my jacket, then looked at my identification and pushed the paperwork back across the counter. "I'm sorry," she said. "That discount doesn't apply to you." I thought she had misunderstood me. "I'm not asking for the active duty rate," I explained. She glanced at the medal again. "Then you should understand that we have rules." I nodded slowly. "I do." She folded her hands on the counter. "Good. Because we're not making exceptions." There were people standing behind me in line, and I could feel them listening even though nobody was looking directly at us. I had already decided to pay the regular rate. I didn't need the discount, and I wasn't interested in arguing with someone over a few dollars. But then the manager looked at the medal one more time and said, "And please don't use that to pressure me into giving you something you're not entitled to." I looked at her. "I haven't pressured you. I'm just saying." "No," I said quietly. "You're not." That was when the man behind me spoke. "Ma'am." The manager looked past me. The man standing in line was older, with silver hair and a calm expression. He was dressed simply, but there was something about the way he carried himself that made the entire conversation feel different the moment he stepped into it. "Could you repeat what you just told her?" he asked. The manager frowned. "Sir, this is a private matter." "No," he said calmly. "It isn't." She looked irritated. "I already explained the policy." "I heard the policy," he replied. "I'm asking about the rest." The manager's expression changed. She stared at him for a moment, and then the hotel supervisor, who had been standing near the lobby entrance, walked over. He looked at the older man, and suddenly the confident expression on his face disappeared. "Admiral?" he asked quietly. The older man turned toward him. "Retired." The supervisor froze. The hotel manager looked between them, confused. Then the retired admiral looked back at her. "Now," he said, "I'd like you to explain the rule again." This time she didn't answer. And that was when I realized the man standing behind me in line wasn't just another guest. He was the person who was about to change everything. My name is Claire Bennett, and I spent most of my adult life trying not to let one medal become the first thing people knew about me. The Purple Heart was part of my story, but it was not the whole story. I had a family, a career, friendships, mistakes, memories, and a life that existed outside the moment when I was injured. I never wanted people to look at the medal and immediately decide who I was. I didn't want pity, and I didn't want people treating me like I was fragile. Most of all, I didn't want to become one of those people who walked into a room expecting everyone to recognize what they had sacrificed. So I rarely wore it. That weekend was different. I was traveling for a family event, and I had decided to wear it with a formal jacket. It wasn't a strategy. It wasn't a demand. I wasn't planning to use it to get anything. It was simply one of those occasions when I felt comfortable wearing it. The hotel was busy when I arrived. I joined the line at the front desk and waited my turn. There was nothing unusual about the morning. People were checking in, asking questions, carrying luggage, and moving through the lobby. I expected to spend a few minutes at the desk, receive my room key, and continue with my day. When I reached the front, I gave the manager my name and identification. She pulled up my reservation and asked whether I was using a military discount. I told her I was. She asked for documentation, and I provided it. She looked at the information, then at my jacket. "Are you currently active duty?" she asked. "No, then this rate doesn't apply." I nodded. "That's fine. I'm asking about the veteran rate." She looked at the screen again, then back at me. "We don't apply discounts based on medals." I stared at her for a second. "I didn't ask you to. I'm just explaining." "No," I said. "You're assuming." Her expression tightened. "Ma'am, I'm trying to help you. If you're telling me I don't qualify, then just tell me that." "I already did." "Then we're done." I reached for my identification, but she didn't hand it back immediately. Instead, she looked at the medal. "I don't appreciate being pressured." That was the moment the conversation changed. I had not raised my voice. I had not threatened her. I had not demanded anything. I had simply asked whether I qualified for a rate the hotel offered. But somehow, the medal had become the center of the conversation. Not my eligibility, not the policy, the medal. I looked down at it. For years, I had tried to make sure that medal never became a weapon. I had never used it to force people to listen to me. I had never walked into a room expecting special treatment. And now, standing at a hotel desk, I was being accused of doing exactly that. I could have argued. I could have asked for a manager. I could have made a scene. Instead, I said, fine, I'll pay the regular rate. The manager nodded. That's available. Good. I expected the interaction to end there. Then she said, and in the future, you shouldn't assume that wearing a medal entitles you to special treatment. I looked at her. The line behind me became completely silent. I took a breath. I don't. Then we have no problem. I looked at her for a long moment. No, we don't. I stepped aside. That should have been the end of it. But the man behind me had heard every word. And unlike me, he didn't step away. Ma'am, he said. The manager looked past me. The older man was still standing in line. He had not moved forward. He had not raised his voice. He had not made a dramatic entrance. He simply stood there, waiting for an answer. Could you repeat what you just told her? He asked. The manager looked annoyed. I don't think that's necessary. Then it should be easy. The manager glanced toward the supervisor. The supervisor started walking over. Sir, perhaps we can handle this privately. The older man looked at him. Perhaps? Then he looked at the manager. But first, I want to make sure I heard correctly. The manager crossed her arms. She asked about a military discount. I explained that she wasn't eligible for the rate she wanted. That isn't what I asked. The manager said nothing. He continued. Did she ask you to make an exception? No. Did she threaten you? No. Did she demand anything? The manager's eyes moved toward me. No. Then why did you accuse her of using her medal to pressure you? The manager's face changed. She had been prepared to defend a policy. She had not been prepared to defend the assumption she had made about me. I didn't accuse her. You said she was using the medal to pressure you. I said I didn't appreciate being pressured. And she pressured you how? The manager didn't answer. The older man nodded slowly. That's what I thought. The hotel supervisor stepped between them slightly. I understand you're concerned, but this is a customer service issue. The older man turned toward him. No, the supervisor paused. It stopped being a customer service issue when your employee decided that a decorated veteran had to justify her character before she could ask a question. The manager's face reddened. I never said that. You didn't have to. The supervisor looked uncomfortable. I stepped forward. It's fine. The older man looked at me. Is it? I nodded. I can handle it. He studied me for a moment, then stepped back. That was the first thing I noticed about him. He didn't try to take control of the situation from me. He didn't talk over me. He didn't act like I was incapable of defending myself. He simply made sure I had the choice. The manager looked at me. Do you want to continue? No, I said. I'll pay the regular rate. The supervisor nodded. Of course. But the older man spoke again. Before she does that, I have one question. The manager looked at him. What? Would you have spoken to her the same way if she hadn't been wearing that medal? The manager stared at him. The question hung in the lobby. She looked toward the supervisor, then back at him. I don't know. Yes, he said quietly. You do. The manager's expression changed. For the first time, she looked less angry than uncertain. The supervisor looked at the older man. Sir, may I ask who you are? The man looked at him. You may. He didn't answer immediately. The supervisor stared at him, and then recognition spread across his face. Admiral? The older man nodded. Retired. The manager looked shocked. Admiral what? He turned toward her. Admiral Thomas Reed. The supervisor took a step back. I looked at the older man. He looked at me, and suddenly, I understood why the supervisor had recognized him. The manager didn't, but the supervisor did. Ma'am, he said quietly, you may want to call the general manager. The manager looked at the supervisor. Why? The supervisor hesitated. Admiral Reed answered for him. Because you just accused a decorated veteran of using her service to pressure you. And you did it in front of a lobby full of guests. The manager looked at me. I already apologized. No, I said. She looked surprised. You explained yourself. You haven't apologized. The manager's expression tightened again. What would you like me to say? I looked at her. I don't want anything from you. That seemed to confuse her. Then what is this about? I glanced at the purple heart on my jacket. This. She looked at it. I never asked you to respect me because of this. I never asked you to give me something I wasn't eligible for. I never asked you to make an exception. I asked you a question, and you decided that the question itself was proof that I was trying to use the medal. The manager opened her mouth, then closed it. I continued. You were allowed to say no. You were allowed to tell me I didn't qualify. You were allowed to ask for documentation, but you were not entitled to decide what kind of person I was. The manager looked down. Admiral Reed remained silent. The supervisor stood nearby. I could feel the people in line listening. For a moment, I wondered whether I had said too much. Then I realized something. I had spent years avoiding conversations like this because I didn't want people to think I was using my service. But silence had never prevented people from making assumptions. It had only prevented me from correcting them. The manager finally said, "I didn't mean to insult you. I believe you." She looked up. "But you did." That sentence landed harder than anything else. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She simply stood there. The supervisor asked whether we could move the conversation to a private office. I agreed. Admiral Reed followed us. Inside the office, the general manager joined us. He listened to what had happened. The hotel manager explained her side. Then I explained mine. The general manager asked me what I wanted. I told him the truth. Nothing. He looked surprised. I don't want a free room. I don't want an apology written for publicity. I don't want anyone fired because of one conversation. The manager looked at me. Then what do you want? I answered. I want your staff to understand that a person can be denied a discount without being humiliated. The general manager was quiet. Admiral Reed nodded. That is the point. The manager looked at the Purple Heart. Can I ask what happened? I looked at her. No. She immediately nodded. Okay. That moment mattered more to me than her first apology, because she accepted the answer. She didn't ask again. She didn't say I owed her an explanation. She didn't say that if I wanted people to understand, I had to tell them what happened. She simply said, okay. And for the first time that day, I believed she was beginning to understand. When we left the office, Admiral Reed and I walked through the lobby together. Outside the hotel, I finally asked him the question I had been thinking about since the front desk. How did you know the supervisor? He smiled. I've stayed here before. That's all? No. I looked at him. He laughed. You have a very direct way of asking questions. So do you. That's because I spent a long time in the Navy. I guessed. He smiled. Then he told me a little about himself. He had spent decades in uniform. He had commanded people. He had made decisions that affected entire crews. He had received medals and recognition, but none of that was the reason he had stepped into the conversation. He told me that he had watched too many people misunderstand military service. Some people assumed every veteran wanted attention. Some assumed every veteran wanted special treatment. Others assumed that anyone who carried a medal was obligated to explain it. He said all three assumptions were wrong. Then he looked at me. You know what I saw when I walked up? What? Someone trying very hard not to make a scene. I smiled. Was it that obvious? To me. Why? Because I used to do the same thing. We stood outside the hotel. People walked past us without knowing what had happened inside. I looked down at the medal. Most people don't know what it is. That can be a blessing. Sometimes. And sometimes. I looked at him. Sometimes people see it and think they know everything. He nodded. That happens? I asked him why he had stayed behind me in line. He thought about it. Because I heard the way she spoke to you. I smiled. That happens all the time. Then it shouldn't. I looked at him. He continued. You were willing to pay the regular rate. That wasn't the issue. No. The issue was that she made you defend your character because she didn't like the answer to a question. I nodded. Exactly. He looked at the hotel. People think respect means giving someone what they ask for. He turned back toward me. It doesn't. Then what does it mean? Sometimes it means telling them no without making them feel small. That sentence stayed with me. Because it was exactly right. I had never needed the discount. I had needed the right to ask about it without being treated like a dishonest person. And Admiral Reed had understood that before I had found the words to explain it. I thought the situation was over. A few days later, I received an email from the general manager. He told me the hotel had reviewed the incident. He did not tell me that the manager had been fired. She hadn't been. Instead, the hotel had decided to change how military and veteran discounts were handled. The staff would be trained to explain eligibility without making assumptions about why someone was asking. The general manager also told me that the manager had asked to speak with him privately after our meeting. She had admitted that she had become defensive because she thought I was trying to pressure her. She had also admitted that she had never stopped to ask herself why she had made that assumption. That was the part that mattered. Not because she was a terrible person. She wasn't. She had made a bad decision in a public conversation. But bad decisions become dangerous when people refuse to examine them. The hotel later sent me a written apology. I read it once, then put it away. I didn't need to keep it. The important part had already happened. The manager had been forced to ask herself a question. Would I have treated this person the same way if I had not seen the medal? That question is uncomfortable. Because sometimes the answer is no. And when the answer is no, we have to decide what to do with that truth. A few months later, I returned to the hotel. I wasn't staying there. I was meeting someone nearby. I saw the manager at the front desk. She saw me too. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she walked around the counter. Hi. She looked at my jacket. I wasn't wearing the Purple Heart. Then she smiled slightly. I know. I laughed. What? You're going to ask me whether you qualify for a discount. I wasn't. I know. That was the first time we both laughed about what had happened. Then her expression became serious. I wanted to tell you something. What? I was wrong. I nodded. Yes. She smiled. You don't have to agree that quickly. I was there. She laughed again. Then she said, I thought I was protecting the hotel from someone trying to take advantage of a policy. But I was so focused on protecting the policy that I stopped seeing the person in front of me. I listened. She continued. I had already decided what kind of person you were before you finished asking the question. That was the most honest thing she had said. I told her I appreciated the apology. Then she asked, Do you forgive me? I thought about it. Yes. She nodded. But, I added, forgiveness doesn't mean I have to pretend it didn't happen. She smiled. I understand. And I believed her. That night, after I returned home, I took the Purple Heart out of the box where I kept it. I held it in my hand for a long time. For years, I had believed that the safest way to carry a medal was to make sure nobody noticed it. That way, nobody would ask questions. Nobody would stare. Nobody would make assumptions. Nobody would think I wanted special treatment. But hiding something doesn't always protect you from being misunderstood. Sometimes, it only means you are doing all the work of carrying it alone. I thought about the hotel manager. I thought about Admiral Reed. I thought about the question he had asked her. Would you have spoken to her the same way if she hadn't been wearing that medal? I didn't know the answer. Maybe she didn't either. But the question had forced everyone in that lobby to think about something bigger than a hotel discount. We live in a world where people often want to know what someone has done before deciding how much respect they deserve. What is your job? What is your rank? What have you accomplished? What have you sacrificed? What have you survived? But dignity should not require a resume. Respect should not begin after someone proves that they deserve it. And a person should not have to explain the worst moment of their life just to be treated like a human being. The Purple Heart did not make me more valuable. It did not make me better than the hotel manager. It did not make me entitled to something I didn't qualify for. But it also did not make me suspicious. That was the difference. And that was what I wished more people understood. I saw Admiral Reed again later. We stayed in touch. Not constantly. Not in some dramatic way. But every once in a while, one of us would send the other a message. He once asked whether I had worn the medal to another hotel. I told him yes. He asked whether I had gotten a discount. I said no. He replied, good. I laughed. Then he sent another message. Did anyone accuse you of using it to pressure them? I wrote back, not yet. He replied, progress. That was Admiral Reed. He never made himself the hero of the story. He never asked me to tell people who he was. He never told me that he had saved me from the hotel manager, because he hadn't. I had been capable of handling the conversation myself. What he had done was different. He had stood behind me. Sometimes, that's all someone needs. Not someone to take over, not someone to speak for them, not someone to turn their pain into a performance. Just someone willing to say, I heard what happened. And, you don't have to stand alone while you decide what to do next. I think about that every time I wear the medal. The medal represents something that happened to me, but the moment in the hotel taught me something else. A person's dignity is not something another person gives them. It is something they have to decide not to surrender. I could have paid the regular rate and walked away feeling embarrassed. I could have told myself that the conversation wasn't worth having. I could have convinced myself that silence was easier. And maybe, on another day, I would have done exactly that. But that day I stayed. I answered the questions, I explained what had happened. And when the retired admiral behind me decided to speak, I allowed him to. Not because I was helpless, Because I understood that accepting support is not the same thing as surrendering your strength. The hotel manager was allowed to say no. That part was never the problem. The problem was that she believed a refusal had to come with a judgment. She could have said, "I'm sorry, you don't qualify for that rate," and I would have accepted it. Instead, she looked at a medal and decided she knew my intentions. She decided I was trying to use it. She decided I was trying to pressure her. And for a few minutes, she forgot that there was a person standing in front of her. That's the lesson I took from that day. You can deny someone a request without denying their dignity. You can enforce a policy without humiliating the person asking about it. You can say no without making someone prove that they are worthy of being treated with respect. And sometimes, the most powerful person in the room isn't the person with the highest rank. Sometimes, it's the person who sees something wrong and decides not to look away. Admiral Reed didn't need to tell anyone who he was. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to threaten the hotel. He simply asked one question. "Could you repeat what you just told her?" And sometimes, that's enough. Because when someone is forced to hear their own words again, they finally realize what they actually said. I still have the Purple Heart. I still don't wear it everywhere. I still don't talk about what happened every time someone asks. But I no longer believe that hiding it is the only way to avoid being misunderstood. The medal is part of my story. It is not my entire identity. And if someone sees it and decides they already know who I am, that's their mistake. I don't have to carry that mistake for them. If you have ever been judged before anyone bothered to ask your story, tell me in the comments. You don't have to share anything personal. Just answer one question. Have you ever been told no and accepted the answer, but still felt hurt by the way it was delivered? And if this story reminded you that strength doesn't always look like shouting, subscribe to the Silent Valkyrie US. Because the next story begins with someone being underestimated and ends with the person who underestimated them realizing that the quietest person in the room may have been the one carrying the most powerful truth. I'll see you in the next story.